So before I get into the story time, I just want to mention that I've been kicked out of 3 different high schools. You guys will probably figure out why, and over time, if you guys get to know me through these stories, you guys will realize that it's pretty bad what I was doing back in high school. Like, if I had to estimate myself from a scale of 1 to 10 how good of a kid I would say I was a really, maybe like a 3 out of 10. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. I wasn't a good kid because ultimately I was like the ultimate F-boy, because I would always be doing the devil's tango, like to the point where I would skip school and stuff. But this story specifically is from a certain school that I'm not going to mention because obviously privacy reasons. But if anyone remembers me IRL doing this, welcome back. And here's the full story of how it happened. And like I usually say to everyone that's watching this video, if you guys haven't already, make sure you guys do click that like button. And I'll mention another way where I got kicked out of high school, at least the first high school I went to. But yeah, click that like button. Let's aim for 1,000 likes on this video, and let's get straight into this crazy story. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another crazy story. So today's story is, like I said, one of the reasons why I got kicked out of high school. This was my second high school I was going to, and honestly, I hated it. The reason I hated it so much was because there was so much gang life going on in that school. Like, I'm not joking. There was literally to a point where kids would literally bring like BB guns to school since Canadian gun laws are really strict. But not even joking, like kids would walk around holding a Glock going like, yo, what's going on, man? Like, you know what I'm saying, dog? I'm a gangster. Like, I don't know. It was just ultimately the cringiest thing. Like, don't get me wrong. I get there's actual gang life out there, and I know there's like actual like, you know, gangsters out there. But to the point where you're like a 16-year-old kid walking around acting like you own the street, it's gross, especially when that street is a school street. Like, bro, come on, really? But anyways, like I was saying though, so I remember I went to this one certain school that I absolutely hated. I hated it so much to the point where I would skip school all the time and go home and play Call of Duty. Like, if my friends that went to that school at the time remembered me, it would usually just be them saying, oh yeah, I always saw him like walking down the hallway and leaving. Like, I never barely saw him in class. And this was true. I hated that school. I hated the school with my passion. And honestly, it got to the point where I did not care at all for it. Like, when I'm not joking when I say like I've gone rogue. Like, I went rogue. I did not care. I would skip school. I would literally go meet up with chicks and go to the devil's tango instead of actually being in that school. But I remember one time specifically, this was my grade 10 year and like my first half of grade 10. It was the first semester, and I remember finals week was coming up. And let me say this right now, nobody in our school liked finals week. Like, if I had to mention how many kids were stressing out crying, and all the Asian kids that had strict parents that were crying over getting the most worst marks, was insane. And I remember the first week of finals week were the grade 9s. And the grade 9s, obviously, let's be real here, you can pass grade 9 without actually trying. But when it came to the grade 10s in my year, everyone was stressing out. Obviously, because if you didn't pass the course, then that means that you're gonna be stuck in the same course again, except with kids that are younger than you. And that's just ultimately weird, bro. So anyways, I remember I was just chilling and hanging out one time, and I was just going to class as usual. Obviously, I didn't care for finals week, so yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I skipped a lot. But then I remember one time specifically, there was a guy who walked up to me. And this guy, he was like a really rich Asian guy in our school. Like, he came from a totally different like country, and he was rich, he was loaded. He literally drove to school in a Ferrari. If that doesn't say much, then I don't know what does. And I remember he came up to me and he said, hey, like, I see you skip school a lot. Like, do you care for this place? Like, do you not care about school? And I looked at him. I'm like, no, not really. It's just like, I hate the school. The school's butt. I said another word, but obviously for YouTube monetization reasons, we're gonna be PG. And he looks at me saying, I want you to do me a favor. He leans towards me as if he was the mafia boss of the school and says, how much for you to pull the fire alarm? At first I was like, whoa, wait a minute. You want me to pull a fire alarm? Then he looks even closer at me saying, yes, I do want you to pull the fire alarm. You have a problem with that? I kind of looked at his eyes and I knew that he was dead serious. And then I decided to say, how much are you offering? He goes into his wallet that was like a Louis Vuitton wallet, and he pulls out like $200. And $200 for me was like a bunch of lunch times and literally a brand new video game all in one pocket. And I said, deal. And I grabbed it. I grabbed that money like there was no tomorrow. But then he looked over again at me saying, He took the money back and he said, pull the alarm first, then run to this classroom. I'll hand you the money and you flee the school. At that moment, I knew that this guy had a plan. This guy knew this was going to happen. And obviously it was because it was finals week and he didn't want to do a final. So I said, bet, watch me. I remember our school at the time didn't have security cameras, by the way. I should probably mention this because probably you guys are like, oh, like, there's no way, bro. Like, there's a camera there. Like, it would catch you. No, there wasn't security cameras. This was an old school. The school was like having moss in the walls. It was gross. It was a terrible school. But anyways, I walked up to the fire alarm and I pulled it. Well, actually, I didn't just pull it right away. I'm not gonna lie. I counted the 3 in my head because let's be real here. It was kind of nerve-wracking knowing that I was gonna pull a fire alarm right at that moment. But like I said, I pulled the fire alarm and the alarm went off. All I hear is, and and it was just back to back to back. It got scarier and scarier, and my heart was beating. I was sweating like there was no tomorrow. I was worried. So I remember I had to make sure I didn't get caught. First thing I did was I ran straight to the elevator that was put in our school. I went to the elevator, I sat in the elevator and went down. When I went down to the bottom floor, I ended up running to a bathroom and stopping for a minute. I sat in the bathroom and waited. I waited. Then after that, a teacher decided to come into the bathroom because obviously teachers need to check the bathroom, make sure there's no kids in there. Like, you know, it's just a safety precaution. But I ended up standing on the toilet, kind of just making sure I didn't get caught. I was standing on the toilet, teacher walks in and then walks out. I was safe. I was in the clear. So I decided to stay in the bathroom and just hold and wait. But then I realized that if my teacher saw that I didn't attend class, but I attended my other classes, they could narrow me down. So what I decided to do is I decided to run back out into the hallway and run to my class. When I ran to my class, I realized my class was already outside waiting and they were about to do countdown. And let's just say if you weren't there for countdown, you would be absolutely screwed. So I decided to text my friend saying, yo, like tell him the teacher, like I'm there, like I'll be there. Just wait it. He said, okay, what were you doing though? And I told him, don't ask questions. I ran down to the nearest exit. And as I was running down to the exit, I remember I saw everyone on the field that we all usually have to go to when the fire alarm is pulled, or when the fire alarm goes off, I should say, not pulled. And I ran up to the guy who owed me the money. I said, hey, real quick, can you like pass it? He gave me the money and he said, good job. Then after that, with $200 in my pocket, I put it in my back pocket and I ran to my class. I stood in the line right beside my friend and the teacher was just starting counting. So I made it just in time. After pulling the alarm and knowing I didn't get caught, I'm not gonna lie, I felt some comfort in me. I felt comfortable. I was feeling like I was awesome. Like I got away with pulling the fire alarm at first. And then I'm not gonna lie, it got the best of me. I remember for that whole week, I pulled the fire alarm like 4 times. 4 times that week alone. And then came the 5th day, a beautiful Friday where no one wanted to be in school. Nobody wanted to be in school, especially me. And knowing it was finals week was even worse. I remember I was walking down the hallway and word got around that I was taking money to pull the fire alarm. Many students were talking about it. And then I remember one time there was one girl that walked up to me and she was one of the hottest girls I remember. She was so beautiful. She was so attractive, wide eyes, amazing cheekbones. Like, holy cow. Victoria Justice, like you had nothing compared to these cheekbones. I remember she came up to me and she said, hey, like Bubba, can I talk to you for a minute? I said, yeah, sure. Like what's going on? She told me to come with her and we went to the science lab, and the science lab was empty at the time. And she told me, hey, like I need you to pull the fire alarm one more time for me. And I told her and I explained to her like, hey, like how much are you charging? And she told me, I'm not charging anything. And then she grabbed me closer and kissed me. Now, I'm not gonna lie, guys. I was a simp, okay? And this girl was one of the hottest girls in school. And when she kissed me, I said, yeah, I can pull it, like not an issue. She smirked and smiled and said, good, can you pull it for this class specifically? And I realized it was the one right after lunch. Right after lunch, I would have to pull the fire alarm. Lunch came around and I remember I went up to the fire alarm and I decided to pull it. I pulled it right away just because that girl's kiss really got me going. And knowing I was so comfortable with doing it, I guess I just decided to do it like there was no hesitation. But right when that happened, I remember I started running. And when I started running the corner, teacher, or should I say the principal himself of the damn school, caught me. He caught me. He pulled me into his office. And let's just say, as like I said in the beginning of the video, I got expelled. Okay, so in no way am I a pyromaniac, but I know that's like a condition that actually like people have, and it's actually the most scariest thing. Like I thought cavemen were addicted to fire, or at least obsessed with it, but I guess some women in this world are also obsessed with fire. I guess when Elisa Keys said, this girl is on fire, she really meant she was on fire. All right, what is going on, you guys? My name is Bubba, and welcome back to another insane story. So today's story seems a little out of pocket, and don't get me wrong, it is, and no one should actually go through this danger, but I'm gonna say this right now, being in a fire is not fun, especially when it's your own house. I remember back when I was in grade 9 going over to grade 10, it was the summer of, and I remember I was basically just, you know, hanging out with my friends on Xbox and doing the same old thing. But then I remember one time I ended up going to this friend party that we were going to. It wasn't really a party, it was more like to get together somewhat, or a getty as people may say. And I remember I ended up going to it. When I got there, I saw a lot of different friends of mine and also saw a couple chicks that I recognized. Now, 2 of them I recognized and I already did the Devil's Tango with at the time, so obviously I didn't talk to them. But there was this one girl that I saw and she was absolutely beautiful. Like, don't get me wrong, she was outstanding looking. So I remember as a man, I decided to walk up to her and say, hey, like, how's it going? I remember she looked at me at first kind of oddly saying like, I'm good, like, what's going on? And then me and her, we started having a conversation about something she really cared about, because, you know, all girls always talk about what they're passionate about in life. It's just the way things go. And then one thing led to another. I ended up doing my unspoken riz. I looked at her deeply in the eyes and I said, you look really good today. She ended up laughing and giggling, and, you know, I knew she liked it. And then one thing led to another. She ended up telling me, oh, like, do you want to go outside with me? At this point, I'm not gonna lie, I thought I was in the clear and I already pulled this girl. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Another girl to go do the devil's tango with. But then I remember basically me and her, we ended up going outside for some reason. And then afterwards, that's when I realized that it was the most ultimate turn-off thing that I ever received. She ended up going in her purse, pulling out a cigar and started smoking it. Yes, she was smoking an actual like cigarette. It was the most disgusting thing ever. And kids, don't smoke. Whatever you do, don't smoke, don't vape, don't do anything with basically smoke in your lungs. It's the most disgusting thing ever. And honestly, to this day, every time I see a kid go out there and just like start vaping or something, I end up going into ultimate disgust. Like, I'm sorry, but what's the big flex for blowing a fat cloud out of your mouth? Like unless you're doing like a cool trick like those weirdos do, like there's really no point. But anyways, I remember this girl started smoking in front of me and I got ultimately disgusted. If you guys don't know, back when I was a kid, let's say I had a really traumatizing experience with cigarettes, and to this day, I hate the smell and taste of them. So I always stay away from them. And knowing this girl was smoking right in front of me, don't get me wrong, she was attractive, but since she was holding a cigarette between her two fingers, it made things even worse for me and I didn't want to talk to her anymore. But me, I already went so far into flirting with her that me just blowing her off wouldn't be easy. So I remember I kind of like ended up like talking to her about a subject that she wasn't really passionate about, and kind of just, you know, took over the conversation, because when you take over a conversation, you can end up ending it. And that's what I did. I remember I ended up pretending I had a phone call, which was, I'm not gonna lie, pretty blatantly obvious, but at the same time, I really didn't care. I just wanted to get out of there. And I remember I literally picked up my phone out of my pocket with literally the home lock screen showing, and I pretended I was talking to my friend telling me to come back inside. She knew I was faking it, but she went along with it and said, oh, okay, I guess I'll catch you in there. As she ends up taking a big puff out of her cigarette, which is ultimately so gross. But basically, I remember I went inside, and when I got inside, I remember I was talking to my friends and stuff, saying how, like, you know, that girl's really weird and stuff. Basically, I was back talking her, and then afterwards, I just ended up hanging out with the other girls that I've already done the devil's tango with. Now, usually around this time, I won't lie to you, usually the day would just move on, and this girl wouldn't care about me and just call me an absolute, you know, eggplant and move on. But this girl wasn't having it. For some reason, when I was talking to the other two girls, the girl ended up walking up to me saying, oh, I thought you were talking to your other friends. What happened? Nothing. I had a conversation with them, is what I said to her. But she wasn't having it. She kept like basically trying to talk to me and stuff. And honestly, it got to the point where all the girls stayed away from me because they thought I was just gonna flirt with her. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was in the wrong for doing it in the first place, but seriously? Like, you had to really cut in like that? So I remember after a while, I basically looked at her and I said, listen, I'm just really not into you. Like, you know, it's just not for me. And at that point, for some reason, this girl thought it was her cue to literally pull me in and kiss me. She ended up making out with me, and I'm not gonna lie, she tasted disgusting. Like, literally, she tasted like smoke in her mouth. It was the most grossest thing ever, and I started to realize how much yellow teeth she had, and knowing that I was rubbing up against my lips, yeah, no thanks. Keep your buck teeth out of my face. So I remember I kind of just started pulling away, and I'm like, okay, listen, like, you gotta stop, bro. Like, I'm not interested. And I ended up walking away. Walking away is usually the best method to, like, you know, get away from people, but for some reason, this one girl was just weird. But she ended up kind of leaving me alone after that, which, I mean, it worked. But then after a while, I remember in the middle of the living room, this girl would randomly pull out her lighter and start playing with it. And it wasn't one of those, like, little lighters that you see most smokers have. She had, like, this really big metal one that, like, you know, had, like, a latch on top, basically. It was, like, one of those old school style ones. And I remember this girl would flip it around and start playing with fire like it was, like, her best friend. I found it so gross and at the same time really just weird. So I ended up kind of staying away from her. And then afterwards, I remember this girl started dropping her lighter on the ground when it was, like, turned on. But luckily, from the velocity of the fall of it going down, it ended up, like, going out at the same time. So luckily, I mean, you know, she didn't set the house on fire, but obviously I went to go tell my buddy about it. And my buddy wasn't having it. So I remember my buddy walked up to her and said, hey, like, listen, if you're gonna play with the lighter, just get out. But then I remember this girl made it a bigger deal than it actually was and basically said, oh, look, what's wrong with my lighter? Like, you got a problem with it? And I remember another buddy of mine ended up coming up behind her and taking her lighter from her hand, and she had a fit. Like, no joke, she started screaming. She's like, give me back my lighter, and basically making it a bigger deal than it actually was. Now, at this point, I remember my friends basically told her to get out, and she ended up leaving. And when she left, I thought things were over. So I remember, like, after a while, like, I want to say 5 hours later, I ended up going home and started walking home. But when I was walking home, I remember I had a gut feeling that something was wrong. I don't know why. I just kept looking around the area, and I'm like, dude, something seems really off. But I remember when I entered my front doorstep and I turned around for like a quick second because I felt like someone was staring at me, there was. It was the girl that was a smoker, and she literally looked at me and said, so this is where you live? Yeah, is what I said. And then she's like, so you're telling me that you're gonna flirt with me and all this, and you're just not gonna invite me in? I mean, I guess. So I remember I ended up opening my house and basically snuck her into my room and we started talking. I'm like, hey, listen, can you like be careful with the lighter though? Like, I actually don't like want any firelight up in my room. And then she ended up pulling out her lighter and she ended up lighting it and basically saying, you know what's good about fire? And I'm like, what? And then she ended up saying, it always brings a light to the world, and when you want something gone, it'll make sure it goes away for you. Okay, girl, you're psychotic, okay? Like, if any girl ever tells you that with a lighter, like, close to her face, bro, you already know she's about to be a pyro. So I remember I basically told her, listen, I gotta go to bed. I got stuff to do tomorrow. Can you just, like, go? She got really upset because she wanted to do the devil's tango with me, but I ended up taking her out the door and basically ended up leaving her there. I didn't know if she walked away from my front doorstep, but, you know, I ended up just going back to my room and sleeping. And when I remember, out of nowhere, I see a truck come up in front of my house, and this girl didn't end up going inside the car, though. I was looking outside my window, and she ended up going to the back of the truck, pulling out some, like, gas canister, and started walking back towards my house. Now, this is where I start panicking. I'm like, what is going on? So I remember I basically, you know, get outside with my pajamas, and I see her literally pouring gasoline, like, flammable gasoline, in front of my doorstep. I look at her, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? She ends up looking at me saying, honestly, you're just one of those people that need to burn. What? Is what I said. And then I remember basically one thing led to another. She ended up literally turning on her lighter and dropping on the ground and started lighting my house on fire. She literally lit my porch on fire. I didn't know what to think. I was like, what are you doing? And I started panicking. I remember when I started panicking, instantly my dad ended up coming outside and seeing what was going on. And the first thing he did was he literally ended up running for the hose on the side of the house and started spraying it down, and also not just spraying the fire down, but also spraying the girl down. It was so funny because she ended up becoming like a wet cat, basically. I remember when that happened, another person ended up coming out of the truck, and it was actually her dad. And I'm surprised her dad let her do that because, like, I guess her dad's like psychotic. But basically, her dad ended up walking up to my dad and saying, oh, like, your son's a player. Like, he just pulls all these girls and doing all this. He deserves to burn. Bro, what's up with these people on fire is what I was thinking in my mind. But I remember my dad ended up calling 911, and one thing led to another. They both ended up getting arrested. The truck was, you know, basically towed away, and honestly, the next day, I just never heard from her. To this day, I don't even know what school she goes to, nothing, but all I'm gonna say is just be careful with the girls you talk to, because who knows, they might just light your house on fire. Okay, so funny enough, pyromaniacs are a real thing, and being a pyro is one of the most scariest things ever because, well, you never know what's gonna be lit on fire next. But let's just say when a girl's a pyro and you're dating that girl, well, you don't want to set her off because it could be the next ticking time bomb, just like this story. But before the story starts, make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Seriously, it means a lot when you guys do, and on top of that, you guys get to hear crazy stories all the time. And if you want to hear them live, make sure you guys go on my Kick channel at kick.com/Bubba. I go live telling crazy stories on there like I do here. But other than that, let's get straight into this. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another really scary story. So if you guys read the title, yes, my house was almost set on fire, or basically was set on fire realistically, because I remember back when I was in high school, this was my grade 11 year, and I remember I had this girl that I was talking to. Now this girl I was talking to, we never really closed the relationship fully, or we never actually officialized ourselves. If you guys don't know what I mean, basically me and her, we always seemed like we're dating, but in reality, me and her, we never decided to actually, you know, make a relationship actually happen. So I remember basically one time when I was hanging out with her, I decided to basically take her out for a nice dinner. And when me and her, we went on a nice dinner, I decided to ask her the question of, yo, so like, are we like officially dating and stuff? She looks at me and kind of starts shaking. I don't know why she was shaking. Me and this girl knew each other really well. But when she started shaking and being terrified of when I asked the question of, should we make ourselves official? She kind of panicked. Now, there's only two reasons why a girl would panic. One, the girl either does not like you, or two, she's hiding a dark secret. And me knowing this, well, I decided to basically think, okay, well, you know what? Just don't worry about the question. You don't have to answer, is what I said afterwards. She ended up basically looking at me and smiling, saying, no, like, I really want to, Bubba, but at the same time, I don't know if I'm ready to take that step yet. Can you wait? Now, when a girl asks you to wait, you gotta understand there's one of two things you only answer. One is a yes if you actually really like the girl, or two is no. But me being a dumb kid in grade 11, I thought it was smart to say, I mean, sure, I can wait a little. Like, what does that even mean? A little? What's a little amount of time? I remember when I said that, she got pretty annoyed, but we ended up just eating our dinner and then going back to her place and doing the devil's tango to kind of let the anger out. Anyways, I remember after that day, basically, the next day at school, I ended up meeting up with some of my friends. Now, I met up with the boys and I ended up talking to them saying, yo, guys, like, what's the plan for this weekend? Because it was a Friday. They ended up looking at me saying, oh, well, the homie Roger is gonna have a party at his place and a lot of chicks are going, so I suggest we go. I ended up looking at them saying, oh, I mean, like, sure, I could bring the girl I'm talking to. All the boys looked at me and said, come on, man, like, you've been seeing this girl for like over like 3 weeks now. Like, why don't you just date her already? We're not ready yet, is what I said, when in reality, she wasn't ready yet. I remember afterwards, the boys ended up just laughing, smiling, looking at me, and ending up basically slapping me on the back of the head saying, sure, man, not ready. And then we ended up walking away. So I remember that night when I got home, I ended up messaging the girl I was talking to, and I said, yo, tomorrow is, well, a party. And I don't know if you want to go with me, but like, I'm gonna be going. She ended up messaging me saying, oh, like, you can go, but I don't think I'm gonna make it. Oh, okay. I guess I'll maybe see you there, I guess. And then from there, she gave no answer. She left me on red. Now, that kind of sucks knowing that this girl I've been talking to for over a month ends up leaving me on red. But at the same time, I mean, hey, I guess we weren't official, so why would it matter? So from there, I remember the day after, me and her, we haven't spoken at all. And what I decided to do was basically go to the party with me and my friends. We ended up getting all in my car. We drove down to the party. And when we got there, I remember there was actually a lot of girls there. I mean, I was walking around, and since I drove, a lot of girls started looking at me and giving me their attention because, well, I had a car, I guess. So they were all walking up to me and stuff. And I remember girls were handing me drinks. And by the way, do not underage drink, guys. It's not cool. But they were all giving me drinks and stuff. And at this point, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little wasted. And what ended up happening was there was one girl at the party I ended up walking up to, and she was, you know, talking to me about cars and all this stuff, and she seemed like a really cool girl. But then me, since I was drinking, I ended up basically talking about the girl I was talking to, and she ended up getting upset and basically walking away. So from there, I remember afterwards, I ended up walking up to another girl that I was basically somewhat interested in, that was actually really hot as well, and I basically started talking to her. And I made sure this time not to talk about the girl I was seeing, because it wasn't cheating necessarily, because, well, even though we were talking, we never made it official. So I remember I was talking to this girl, flirting with her, and she was flirting back, and one thing led to another. Somehow, with all my riz, I ended up making out with her. We ended up making out in the kitchen, and I remember there was like not that many people in the kitchen as well. But then out of nowhere, I remember as I was in the kitchen making out with this girl, ends up basically coming around the back and right behind me. She came behind me and said, are you freaking serious? I ended up looking and turning my head and saying, wait, what? Because I recognized that voice, and it was the girl that I was talking to. I ended up looking at her saying, what? I thought you weren't gonna make it to the party, and I thought you were gonna try to make it official with me, is what she said afterwards. And then I remember I got upset because, like, what? She said she wasn't ready to be official, and that's what I told her. And at that point, when I said that, I remember everyone at the party started going to the kitchen and kind of seeing what was going on. It was super embarrassing, and I basically told her the facts of, hey, this wasn't my fault, and you never made it official with me. And me saying that made her really upset to the point where I saw in her eyes that she was going nuts. And by crazy, I mean literally crazy. Because I remember she ended up grabbing the drink from my hand, which was alcohol. And if you guys don't know, alcohol, fire starter. Let's just put it that way. So I remember she ended up grabbing the alcohol from my hand and grabbing a bottle that was on the table, and she ended up basically looking at me saying, oh yeah? You want to be like that? I'll burn you to the ground. Wait, what? Is what I said. And she ended up basically grabbing this bottle, throwing it on the ground, smashing it, and alcohol dropped everywhere. I remember the host of the party, Roger, ended up coming into the kitchen saying, hey, you better clean that up. Instead of cleaning it up, she ends up going to her back pocket and pulling out a lighter. And not these like weird gas station lighters that are cheap. Like, I mean a heavy metal, crazy lighter, a real fire starter. And she ended up lighting it up and saying, I'm gonna drop this, everyone run. We all started looking at each other thinking there's no way. And right as I said, okay, you need to calm down, this girl ended up getting even more upset to the point where she dropped the lighter and fire was starting from the ground. I remember everyone started looking around, screaming and freaking out and actually running away because there was fire on the ground. At that point, I remember me and the boys were trying to think of something to do. But luckily, one of the boys that were in the backyard ended up seeing the hose and seeing that there was a fire starting inside. So he ended up basically running to the hose, grabbing it and running it back inside the house and shooting it. I remember from there, I basically ended up trying to grab this girl that I was seeing that ended up starting the fire because there was no way I was going to let her off the hook with that. And then another girl ended up calling 911 that I was making out with. And let's just say it became a disaster because the girl that I was seeing ended up getting arrested for being an absolute pyromaniac. And well, all the boys ended up saving some dumb stuff, but at the same time, I'm not gonna lie to you. Yeah, there was a lot of damage that we couldn't really explain to the cops because we were all underage drinking, and well, a lot of the boys and I had to make up a story that would not get us in trouble for underage drinking, but as well as basically make it seem like that this girl was just batshit crazy. The only time I'm actually gonna swear on this channel, just saying that now. But other than that, she ended up getting in trouble. We ended up all going home, and well, yeah, that's basically it. All I'm gonna say is that be careful about the pyromaniac girls, because if girls want to start fire, they will start a fire. Anyways, guys, that is basically it for today's story. Make sure you guys do leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And like I always say, just follow for more embarrassing but crazy stories just like this one.